In this Visual Basic lab, we're going to look at creating a forms application that uses text boxes both to get input from the user and to display input to the user. So it's basically an exercise where you'll get to learn how to use text boxes to get input and output on a Windows form application. You're going to create a basic calculator like the one I've got on the screen, and it's simply just going to add up two numbers. So if the user types in two numbers, 10 and 20, presses the add button, and the total is displayed at the bottom. Simple program. Let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is open up Visual Studio, select New Project, which I've done. So you have a different screen, maybe you'll have New Project shown on here. If not, you can do File, New. When you click on New Project, you get the New Project window appears. Make sure you select Windows Form Application, and then importantly, give it a name down the bottom. So I'm naming this Lab2A Basic Calculator, and I'm using underscores so that it becomes one word. Let's press OK. In a few moments, Windows comes up with the basic workspace as it does a bit of thinking. Okay, a few things in this when you come up with the workspace. Depending on how you've previously used Visual Studio, you may see the things you want to see or not. And when I say the workspace, it's these different windows where you can actually operate in Visual Studio. What you want to make sure is go into the View button and make sure that you can see, well, I always have the Solution Explorer displayed, which we've got over here, which shows me my Visual Basic form and my code. What you also need, most importantly, is the Properties window, so make sure you select that, and that's down here on the bottom right, and we'll start using that in a moment. And the final thing you want to make sure is displayed is the toolbox. Now I've got the toolbox here. Now you'll notice as the toolbox is displayed, it's on what's called auto hide. It only displays when I click on it. For this moment I'm going to pin it into place. You see this pins to the left. If you click on that, and then it's permanently locked in. So basically your screen should look like this. You've got a form which Visual Studio's given us because we've asked for a forms application, that's this. And we've got a toolbox which has got the tools that we want to use. We're only going to use these ones under common controls, the common bits and pieces, so don't worry about any of the others. We've got the Solution Explorer, which just simply tells you what forms you've got and what code you've got, and this Properties window, which we'll make use of in a moment. First thing we're going to do is, you can see the program or the window's called Form 1. I want to change that, so I click on it and I go over to this Properties window, and there's a property, if you can't see it, scroll down till you see the property called Text, and I'm going to call this Calculator. Give it a more meaningful name, if I could spell it properly, Calculator. Press enter, and you look, and on your form that's the name of it. The first thing I need to do, let's just make sure I've got enough room. Form looks okay. I'm going to drag on a label. So to get a control from the toolbox onto your form, you just click on it, drag it across. It's about the right position. This is a label. This is just going to tell the user what they need to input. While you've selected the label, you can see the dotted line around it. We're going to change the properties again of this, the text property, because label 1 doesn't mean a lot. And I'm going to type in first number. Press enter. You can see the labels change. Oops, I want to put a colon after that as well. First number. Okay. So that tells the user what they've got to input. Now we've got to give them something where they can type in their input. We're going to use a something called a text box for this. So if I look down in my controls, I drag the text box. It positions it near enough for you. Let's just change the properties of the text box first. The text box is going to allow the user input. We want to give it a name, so if I go up to the properties, I've selected text box here, and I'm going over to the properties for the text box. The default name is text box 1. Now we're going to put some code in for this text box. Text box 1 doesn't mean a lot, so I use a convention to name them correctly. I put first of all txt as a prefix, which tells me when I'm writing the code that that's a text box. And then I'm going to give it a meaningful name, so I'm going to call it number 1. So I know that anything that's typed in that text box refers to the first number the user's entered. We don't see anything change on the form, but the name has changed. Text boxes, just to give you a brief explanation, are used as basically what it says on the tin. They're for entering text into a program, so a user can type anything they want into this box. They're also used for displaying text, so in the programming code you can put text into this box to display to the user. So we've got a first number label and a text box, and we've changed the properties for both. At this point, why don't you pause the video and do the same in your own program. So create a program, Windows form application, name it correctly. One important thing I forgot, let's make sure we save it in the right place. I'm going to do File, I'm going to do Save All. It's given me the name, but I want to make sure it's saved in the right place. And you can see the default here is somewhere on my laptop, but it's not where I want to be. I actually want to save it. Excuse me while I do a bit of jiggery pokery here. I'm actually going to save it in VB Lab examples. I'm going to copy this across. When you do this, you want to browse and find the right location to put yours in. So make sure you save your programs in wherever you're saving your VB program. So that's where I'm saving mine. And that's all I need to do, so I know it's saved in the right place so I can find it later. So at this point you go off and do the same thing on your program. Okay, continuing on, so we've got the first number. Now we're going to do exactly the same steps to create the place where the user can type in the second number. I'll put the label. It's called Lab2A by default. That's no good to me, so I'm going to type in second number with a colon to tell the user what the next text box is. I'm going to drag a text box up there, and as before, I'm going to change, while I've got the text box selected, I'm going to change the name of it to say, when I come to the programming code, I know what it is. TXT in lowercase is the prefix, so I know it's a text box, and this one's just going to be number 2. So we've got the text box and the number. At this point, pause the video again and do the same thing in your program. Okay, let's add, now we're going to add a button. Now a button on a Windows form is what basically creates the actions. So what I want to do is add a button on there, and when the user clicks on this button, I want the program to add up the two numbers they've entered and display the total. But for the moment I'm just going to change the name of the button again, button 1, as you can see on here. Oh, sorry, I'm not going to change the name, I'm just going to change the text. This is the text that appears on the button. I'm going to type in add so the user knows what it does. So when they click on add, it's going to add up the two numbers. But what we haven't put is somewhere to display the total. We need another label and another text box for that. So the label tells the user what it is. So let's drag another label on, same as we did before. And this label, we're going to change the text to the word total. And then we need another text box where we're going to display the total in place. Once again, if you look at the default name for text box, not really much meaningful, so I want to call this TXT total. So when I come to the programming, I know what's going to go in that text box. So we've set up the basic form. At this point, pause the video again, put the button, the total and the text box for the total, so that the form looks like the one I've got on the screen. Right, final thing we need to do is add the programming code. To do that, you double click on the button, and when you double click on the button, what Visual Studio does is it opens up the Visual Basic editor. And what it's done is it's put some code in for us, enough Visual Basic code to run what's called the procedure. This is the procedure, the piece of programming code that will run when the user double clicks that add button. Okay, so when they click on the add button here, the code's going to run here. Now it's very important, the cursor is actually between these two lines, private sub and end sub. You make sure you only put your code between those two lines, so where the cursor is positioned, that's where you type in your code. Okay, the code we're going to type in, I'm not going to explain it in too much detail, I'm going to cover this in other labs, but first of all we want to add up the two numbers and make sure the total is put into the text box that displays the total. So I'm going to start typing txt, because I know that's what I called my text boxes, and you'll see that Visual Studio prompts you and says, well, okay, I've got three controls on that form that begin txt. I want the one called total. I'm going to double click on it. He said double click on it and it will appear up there. One other thing I need to do is I've got to put the dot and then text, and basically what that means is put in the text part of the text box whatever calculation we're going to put on the right hand side of the equal sign. Got an equal sign. Now what we've got to do is we've got to add up the two numbers. So the first number, as we know, is in txt number 1. Not quite as simple as that. Again, we've got to put a dot and text, and that tells Visual Basic take the text that's been entered into the text box called txt number 1, take that text and do something with it. And I'm going to do the same thing for this one, txt number 2 dot text. This should work, but to make it sure, basically because we're actually adding up numbers, there's an extra thing I'm going to do. This should actually work as a program. I'm going to make absolutely sure there is a function in Visual Basic called val, V-A-L, and what it does is it converts any text into the number. So if somebody types in 10, it's going to convert it into the number 10. And I'm going to do the same here. So I'll put val, so I'll put these additional functions in. So now I've made sure that whatever's typed in there into the text box is converted into a number, and then the two numbers are just added together, and the result of the two numbers being added together should be put there. So that is the code. This line is the line of code that you need to put on your program. So pause the video at this point, double click on the add button, and then put the code exactly where it is here, making sure you don't delete any of the original code that Visual Studio has given you. Okay, so now we should be at the point where we can play, and hopefully this program should run. I press the play button at the top. It's actually it's called a debug button, but as far as we're concerned it's just going to play the program. It's not showing me any errors. So I get the basic window comes up. Let's just see it works. 10, 10, add them, and the total's 20. Let's see if it works. 15. Yep, so we've got a working program. So at this point you can close the video and test your own program.